Clay, we've complained endlessly about the quality of Enterprise's cold opens, and here we go. As the show's about to leave us for the rest of our lives, only a couple episodes from the end of the season, the fourth season, the final season of Star Trek Enterprise, we get this one, which they borrow heavily from First Contact, but it's a good cold open. I was having a trivia game on Discord with some of the patrons the other day, and it came up like one thing to talk about would be like a top 10 cold open, Star Trek cold open list. That would be something interesting. Sure. There's a few that I can think of from the other series, but I think this is the only one from Enterprise so far that would make that list if I were to make one. I think this is a top 10 contender. It's kind of neat. It's cool what they did.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. For an episode that is probably what I would call the absolute definition of fan service, it delivered the most important fan service to me, which was directly calling back to First Contact and then eliminating the song from the show.
Yeah. Both are additions by subtraction or something like that. But yeah, the cold open has the ending of First Contact where James, is it Cromwell? Am I blanking on his name?
Yes.
Cromwell, James Cromwell. Comes out and he's about to greet the Vulcans who have landed and expose their ears, giving everybody the heebie-jeebies in the theater. And then instead of reaching out to shake their hand, he pulls a shotgun out of his jacket and blows those Vulcan bastards right to hell. And then they storm the ship, and that's the start of the Terran Empire, or so we're led to believe. So
if you don't know it's coming, great opening. I mean, it's a good opening even if you do know it's coming. Yeah. But like if you're just sitting down for whatever this week's episode of Enterprise is and opens with that, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting because there's been no hint of the mirror universe to that point, and then it goes into the theme song right there. So that's the only clue. So we're talking about In a Mirror Darkly this week. It's a two-parter, so I have a little bit of reading to get through here. It is the 18th episode. Part 1 is the 18th episode of the fourth season of Star Trek Enterprise. It came out on April 22nd, 2005. It is one of two in the In a Mirror Darkly arc. It is one of 13 in the Mirror Universe arc. It is 2 of 6 in the USS Defiant arc. Written by Mike Sussman, directed by James L. Conway. In-universe date, January 13th, 2155. Stardate 0141.7. And April 5th, 2063. In Part 1, in the Mirror Universe, Commander Archer mutinies against Captain Forrest in order to capture a future Earth ship found in Tholian space. The second part, it's the 19th episode of the fourth season of Star Trek Enterprise, came out on April 29th, 2005. 2 of 2 in the In a Mirror Darkly arc, 2 of 13 in the Mirror Universe arc, 3 of 6 in the USS Defiant arc. Teleplay again goes to Mike Sussman. Story credit goes to Mandy Koto, directed by Marvin Rush. In universe date, January 18th, 2155. In the second part, in the Mirror Universe, the destruction of the Enterprise leaves the crew stranded aboard the USS Defiant, a ship from a future parallel universe where a governing body known as the United Federation of Planets reigns, inspiring T'Pol to speak out against the tyranny of the Terran Empire.
When you say 1 of 13 in the Mirror Universe arc, are you talking chronologically across the entire franchise?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So Discovery's included in that. There have been 13 Mirror Universe episodes to this point. This is the second best. I'll say that from the start.
Yeah, it is.
Mirror is better, but you can't get better than the original TOS concept. But I think that this, as fucked out as the Mirror Universe is in this goddamn franchise, this is the second best episode out of these 13, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say so. I still think it suffers from a lot of the problems that every Mirror Universe episode that isn't Mirror suffers from, which is like, yeah, it's fun, but it's kind of ultimately not about anything.
Yep.
But you do, they at least wisely didn't play the Mirror Universe card until 4 seasons in, so you actually had familiarity with the characters that you could invert instead of doing it 3 episodes into a brand new series. But,
yes.
That being said, it also reminded me kind of a lot of the most recent Discovery Mirror Universe episode. Well, I would say the first episode of this 2-parter did. it seemed to, and maybe I don't know if that's just because all Mirror Universe episodes are eventually about a mutiny against the Captain or something.
Yeah.
But
it's a limited universe with which you can play around in.
But yeah, the idea of mutiny against the Captain and trying to find the super powerful ship from the other. Isn't that what they do in Discovery? Is
in
at some point
the first season you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the mutiny. Are they looking for a powerful ship in that case?
For some reason, I thought that it was like they needed to. Well, I guess they have a Discovery in the Mirror Universe, right?
Yeah. What is Lorca doing? Lorca wants to go back with the Discovery for some reason, right? Do they not have a Discovery?
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't remember.
I don't care. Forget it.
Reliving the glory
similar
days
enough
of
to
Discovery
really-
season 1 on the on this Enterprise podcast.
But yeah, I thought it was good. It's tough because I think it's fine, but it is also very much like let's get as much as many cheap pops as we can on the way out the door here, because you got the Mirror Universe, you got the Defiant, you've got the whole second episode takes place on the bridge of a TOS style ship.
Yeah.
The Gorn shows up in a questionably rendered version of the Gorn.
Yep. A questionable subplot too. In all honesty, yeah.
Subplot that doesn't really go anywhere after they kind of kill that guy. But that being said, I liked some of the subterfuge that was going on. I liked what was going on with the Vulcans. I liked the ending of the second episode. I thought it ended really well. But I do think it features across 2 episodes the single worst performance from Scott Bakula I've ever seen.
Yeah, we could start there. He's pretty bad in this. It was an interesting acting performance because in a lot of ways we always do our power rankings at the end of a season, and we kind of go through like what characters we like, and a lot of it is based on the actors that are in it. I thought that some of the actors in this are elevated from a position where I've previously held them, just because I was like, oh, they can actually do more than one thing. Bakula actually takes a nosedive where he's now, like, without hesitation, I'm like, he's the worst captain of all the captains. That was always going to be the answer, but now it's just like, yeah, he's clearly the worst actor in a worst captain character of all time, because I was watching this all the time. Every time that he's on there, I'm just going, this episode would be real different with any of the other captain actors in this role. Like if it was the same episode, but it was just any of the other characters in it, or any of the other actors, because he spends the entire time with his perpetual Bakula frowny face where it looks like he's got a hurdy poop about to come out, and he's just like disappointed by everything that's going on, and his anger and rage never sells. It never comes across to me that he's actually angry about everything. Yeah.
Not once. Yeah. And he keeps trying to dial it up and go over the top, but he goes over the top like someone who's never climbed a fence before. And he struggles to get to the top, and he catches his leg of his pants on the spoke on the top and kind of falls over and, tears his groin, and then just comes plummeting back down to the mud. It's not believable. It's not, if there's almost the Room level quality to his performance in this, where if I were him, I would have been like, well, what I was trying to do is I was actually trying to harken back to William Shatner.
Call him Bill.
Original
Make
series.
it sound like you talked to him about this.
Yeah, Bill. I love Bill's performance, and I really wanted to pay homage to it, because there was a few moments that, like, the way they shot it. There's one in particular, the first time where he kisses Hoshi, where I was like, this feels like a 60s TOS kiss, because it's one of those things where it's like the only way we know how to play sexual tension on TV at this point is the guy has to grab her by the shoulders and hold her really intensely, and then just put his whole face into her whole face to kiss.
No tongue, just smashing lips together.
Face on face. And it was just really strange. Like all of that stuff that was like outside the realm of kind of more naturalistic acting felt really foreign to me coming from him. And there's so much sex with him in this episode, these 2 episodes. And it's kind of creepy. And I was watching it and my girlfriend walked in and she goes, "Oh, what's this episode?" Right as they kiss for the first time. And she goes, "Ugh." And she just left the room and never came back.
I was curious about it, right? Because I was watching it and I was similarly like, Amy was sitting with me and I was similarly like had a weird feeling in my stomach. I always feel that watching sex scenes with Amy is kind of strange anyway, because I look at her, I'm like, should we start? Like, there's this, like you're like acknowledging that.
Do you want to
try these things that they're doing? I always feel that there's this like awkwardness.
The last time you suggested that was during Requiem for a Dream, and you'll never live it down.
Thank God all the kids came before that. But like there's always this awkwardness of watching it, a sex scene with my wife for some reason, just because it like you feel you have to comment on it, even though you don't really like. It's just this kind of throwaway thing. But in Enterprise, I was really I'm not prone to this idea, but I was like, is this too? Are they taking the trope of like the sexy sexism of the 60s? Are they going too far with it? Does it feel worse for some reason because they're not nailing it? And I was like, no. Like, I think it's fair to pay homage to that. Like, this feels appropriate to TOS. I think the tone of this really feels like the 60s TOS mirror universe in a lot of ways, which I think is the success of the episode. So then I'm left just looking at it going, I think it's just that Star Trek is so unsexy that this is disturbing me, because right after this was over, we watched the You series on Netflix, which Amy's watching. There's a lot of, sex in that. There's like graphic sex scenes and stuff. But I wasn't disturbed by that. It's just the fact that Star Trek and Enterprise are so sexless and asexual that once they start getting into it in a way that TOS is not, it never feels weird when Kirk and TOS do it, but it does feel weird when Archer and this crew do it. That's a long way just to say this show is. It felt very jarring to go from the completely bland Enterprise thing into a 60s sort of homage where all the sexiness is very upfront, and it's like the show is never. They can't even get the Trip and T'Pol thing right. Now they expect to get this thing right. Yeah. They didn't do it. Yeah,
yeah. That's the thing that's weird about it, is because I think the successfulness of that stuff, series to series, depends on how much it is, not how frequently it's present, but like, for instance, it doesn't feel weird in the 60s one because it's always kind of there under the surface to a certain extent. Yep. Kirk is always kind of sexed up a little bit. Everybody has got short dresses and cleavage out and, bulging biceps and stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel as weird. And, at this point, looking back at that, there's a camp factor to it that kind of sands the edges off as well.
I think that show is more honest about sort of intimate, attraction relationships too. Like it had a kind of honesty about like there were like people were hooking up on the ship. There were like people had kissing. They would fall in love with characters of the week. There was a sense that you could actually play with that emotional state. And Enterprise really feels very sterile. Like no one ever has any interest in that stuff.
That's the thing, is that Enterprise specifically is just sexless and kind of immature in how it handles that stuff. Because even TNG, people aren't fucking all over the ship in TNG, but you get a sense that when they deal with that stuff, it's dealt with a little bit more maturely.
They have adult relationships. Yeah, they have the to go back to our Little Women, they have the Victorian era women's writing about sexual. It's like people fraught with emotion, but they're not going to actually have sex with each other.
Yeah, and I think DS9 fucks a little bit more than the other shows do. It's a little bit more natural there. They try to do it on Discovery, but it just feels weird in Discovery. Yep. It's never felt right. I'm not sure why. I think it's because they're trying to be edgy and modern, so they go too far with it sometimes. But this show has just always been so kind of clinical Even when they're trying to do sexy stuff, it feels like they're doing it very clinically.
Yeah.
Let's have some nice, competent, establishing shots of a woman's bosom as she rubs sparkling stuff onto her chest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, okay, this isn't exactly the Spice Channel here.
We've come a long way from that. The Spice Channel, nice callback. I'm getting blurry lines in my vision.
I'm just trying to make a reference that's contemporary to when people are watching it.
Yeah, it's one failing that in a show that otherwise I think really did the tone pretty well across the board, maybe outside of Bacula and the sexiness. I think this does a good job of really feeling like TOS in a way that the other plot lines, even the Klingon and the Vulcan arc, there was like an intersection of TOS in this series that was more intellectual than I actually felt it, but this felt like there was actually like aesthetic connections. Like the set design and everything is like, oh, like I see how they're going to move into this kind of era, even if it doesn't really make any sense. Like the bridge of the Enterprise doesn't look very advanced compared to the Enterprise and stuff. It's all that irrelevant nonsense, but in tone I thought it worked.
That was one thing that actually really stood out to me this time, and usually I don't care about this stuff, but the bridge of the TOS era Defiant felt a lot older and not as sophisticated as Enterprise does.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they go out of their way to show close-ups of buttons and shit.
Buttons,
and when
how accurate they are. Yeah.
When you see T'Pol jotting down transmission codes or whatever on one of those like blue rectangles that existed before floppy disks existed. It was just an approximation of what like a filing system, digital filing system might be like, versus the shit that they have on Enterprise. It's like, okay. So yeah, I calling too much attention to that stuff does make it kind of stand out. But I even there, like it felt like they were trying in certain ways to go for the 60s aesthetic, but they like were kind of too timid to go all the way or something. Like when you show up to Enterprise and it's like, oh, it's the mirror universe, so all the women are wearing midriff uniforms.
Yeah.
It feels really kind of awkward to me, specifically because none of the men's uniforms are changed. It's like if they really wanted to go for that, it would be midriffs and no sleeves for the men.
That's true.
Or something,
they don't do the sleeves. Yeah, yeah. Even
it felt a little bit like they were like, all right, what can we do to make this different? What if everybody shows? What if all the hot ladies put their stomachs on display?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Mayweather was like, I can take the sleeves off this jumpsuit.
Why did they have him take his sleeves off? That's all that they
if anyone should take the sleeves off, it should be him.
Travis. I did find a strange symmetry that he's useless in both universes.
Yes.
Really. Like he just doesn't have
But he's evil because he's got an earring now.
Yeah, and he has a sort of like G.I. Joe hair. Like he has like
he's got the hair from Blade.
Yeah, he's got Blade's hair. I was his hair always took my fancy. I don't think he says anything. And to jump to the end, he's not integral to the plot, right? He comes in and Hoshi kisses him, but he didn't set Archer up in any way, right? They were just having Hoshi kiss literally every guy in the cast, and they're like, hey, come on in, Anthony.
I guess. Yeah, I really kind of lost track of the
backstabbing.
The backstabbing plot, because at first I thought that they rounded it out when they got I don't know. I thought they had tied it up like 3 different times, and then it kept coming back, because once you get to the second episode, it doesn't really feel like that's going on anymore. And ultimately, even so, I couldn't really figure out why it was that important, given what they were trying to do, the overall larger story.
Yeah.
But I did like the end. I did like the ultimate turnabout by Hoshi was good.
Hoshi, the long lost ancestor of Philippa Georgiou, right? Both Asian.
I guess.
I have to assume they're related, being Asian with each other. So let's get
there's no other possible.
There's no other explanation.
Explanation. Yeah, they must be related.
So I think that the reason that this works mostly for me as a mirror universe is because the mirror universe generally in all the other series where they do things like this, it generally tends to struggle to have anything to say. That's why it works so well in TOS, is because the mirror there is so clear, where it's the upstanding TOS crew runs into evil versions of themselves, except for Spock, who's the twist in that episode that he is not really particularly evil in the mirror universe. He's still a logical character that they can interact with. This one, what I thought that this one did well is that I appreciated all the little glimpses into both the character work that has been done in the Prime universe and where the sort of founding of the Federation starts. So, I think it's really interesting to make this a mirror universe episode that is about how the Terran Empire sort of kickstarted its stuff that we know further down the line. They're clearly evil starting this, but you don't get the sense that they are a completely monomaniacal, genocidal race at this point. Between Forrest and the other admirals that Archer runs into, they're bad people, but they're not mustache twirling mirror universe type people that Archer and Hoshi eventually become in this. So I thought that it's kind of neat to see the start of the mirror universe be mirrored as or the Enterprise, the start of the Federation be mirrored in how the Terran Empire came to be. I thought that was kind of cool. But I also thought that little scenes like the first scene that Trip and T'Pol share, where they're having the same awkward interaction with each other because they've slept with each other. But in the mirror universe, he's upset that she used him or something for Pon farr. It's a slight twist on they did have sex, but the reasons they did it are different than they were in the Prime universe. It's a little more twisted and dark in this version. I liked all that stuff. I thought it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I thought that stuff was good. I think it falters. I honestly think the setup is probably better. I'd say if you're calling the two episodes one big story, I think the first act and the last act are a lot better than the middle, because you get into some weird stuff like evil Archer seeing a ghostly version of good Archer who's the conscience on his shoulder driving him to be more evil or something that I kind of came out of nowhere and meant ultimately nothing.
Yep. That's the same with the Gorn. I would tack that in. It's a two-parter that really feels like they padded it to make it two parts. It's one of those 1.5 episodes where they don't need a full 2 episodes to get the point across, so they have to fill it a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like you could probably do this in one episode. I mean, I would say 1.5 probably, and I kind of get what they're going for with that stuff, where he's seeing this other version of himself that's so highly respected, and he's not, and so he's trying to climb his way up the ladder through force, and it ultimately bites him in the ass, or et cetera, et cetera.
Did you find that believable? He's
not really.
He's played as paranoid. Mirror Archer is played as paranoid from the start. He's kind of a he doesn't seem like he has all of his marbles together, but he loses his mind over the course of the 2 episodes, where this angelic version of Prime Archer is on his shoulder, sort of confusing him about what's going on and things like that, and pushing him to do this stuff. The big thing for me is that, in the Archer, in the playground of these 2 Archers pairing off against each other, where he reads the Wikipedia entry about what Prime Archer was all about, boy, has this series really failed to make me feel like anyone's going to remember Jonathan Archer when this is over.
Oh, seriously. Yeah.
Oh, he was reading that entry. Yes. I was just like, he's like, they named 67 universities after him. 2 planets are named after. It's like, this guy?
He is known as the greatest explorer in human history.
He's this bumbling idiot for 4 seasons.
Yeah, and it's like all I'm picturing when they're saying that is that counting the time he turned into like a Cro-Magnon monster and then got squirted by a sex plant and almost
Am I being unfair to him? I really feel that the other captains, I at least felt that they deserved some kind of blurb like that. Like if any character came up and gave them the potted history before they record their academic podcast or something, I would have bought all of those descriptions of those captains. Yeah. I don't buy that stuff about Archer. They're assuming a lot of stuff that happens after the show goes on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like it's kind of like not even Christopher Columbus or like one of those guys has been referred to as the greatest explorer who ever lived.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously for well within good reason. But it's just so strange because with people like those, people like them, it's like, oh, well, a traditional understanding that he discovered the New World, or Lewis and Clark or something like that, went down the Mississippi River. Highly regarded, but not talked about like that. But in this case, you get to see what Archer actually did.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, he was just the guy in the chair at the time, really, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't get the sense like that description is, I don't think his character lives up to that description. But again, maybe that's part of the idea, is that over time, because I mean, think about what they do with Zephram Cochrane, right? He's he's so highly regarded in the TNG era where we first hear about him, but then you go back and you meet him, and he's this drunken shithead who just fell ass backwards into warp travel.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's clearly a point of that. Is like the point of in First Contact. It's about meeting your heroes. Never really lives up to what you expect of them. But Archer is not being played that way. Archer is just being talked up as he has to be important because he's the first captain who's out here. Yeah, despite all.
Yeah, evidence. I think when you come down to that stuff, it does intention. It doesn't trump execution. Mm-hmm. You know, like if you want to put that in there, and so someone can read this and be like, "Oh, okay, sure." They're making this comparison of he's after how many years he's been treated, blah 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 blah. If that's never been like a subtextual or textual thing they've done on the show.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even really come up again in this episode, so it's not like they're trying to make a point about it or anything. So it's difficult.
Yeah, outside of the we're trying to live up to the angel on his shoulder type thing. Like he reading that blurb is what sets him off in that insanity complex thing where he's hearing that Archer voice in his head.
Yeah, but yeah, it's I like what they do with Archer in this, that they do give him that sort of inferiority complex that drives him. I don't know if they, I don't know if they necessarily. I think they could have done the same thing with Hoshi instead of this weird, ghostly Jiminy Cricket version of Prime Archer showing up. You know, like especially because Hoshi is revealed to be the kind of the mastermind of the situation and taking the most advantage of everything. I think there's plenty of, and they spend so much time in bed with each other.
Yeah.
That she kind of has the perfect role for sort of digging away at his insecurities and his self-confidence.
Yeah. It would have spoiled the ending, I guess. Right. Like they play that as a surprise.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you do it. It's all in the execution.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like the mirror universe doesn't really matter, So it's like I can't hold it too hard against it that things aren't either played up or like some of the logic that's used there or some of the character decisions, because it's never really about like continuity within the Terran Empire is important to me. It's just not
right.
The universe is so nonsensical that to try to make a continuity out of it is pointless. Like when you talk about how does the Klingon Empire exist when they're basically built on like I'm going to kill the captain and I'll become the captain.
Right.
This is an even worse version of that, because the Klingons have this like at least this basic spine of like honor culture. Like there's only you only kill the captain if you think that he's unworthy of being killed. But the mirror universe is just your whole life is based around it.
You still got to beat him in a fight.
You still got to fight him, right? Yeah, you tell him you're going to kill him.
If you were to stab him in the back, you would probably also be executed. You know? You have to actually stand him down and challenge him to a duel.
Yeah, so that works. But in the mirror universe, it's just I'm going to poison your tea and you're going to die. But everyone still drinks tea all the time.
I feel like there's a Lower Decks episode in there somewhere. Like, did you see the Rick and Morty episode about time travel with the snakes?
I don't think so.
it's really good. It gets into into the ridiculousness of time travel and the endless paradoxes that it would create if it was something that could actually happen. It's worth watching. It's a good one. But I feel like there's a Lower Decks episode built in that you could do in the mirror universe that's just everybody just poisoning each other over and over and over again.
Mix in that the Princess Bride scene, just like forgetting which cup is poisoned is the way the mirror universe works. So,
but I think I can't remember if it was during DS9 or Discovery, or maybe it was completely separate from any coverage. I can't remember if we talked about this, but I feel like somewhere along the way we came across someone's theory making sense of the mirror universe, in that there's nothing that says it's the same one every time. So that accounts for the lack of continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, the Discovery mirror universe doesn't need to line up with the one from DS9, which doesn't need to line up with the one from TOS, just because mirror can mean a lot of different things, I guess. It could be any number of other universes.
Yeah, I guess I would argue this feels distinctly like the TOS universe. Like DS9 always felt weird. DS9's mirror universe always felt like this seems like a strange version of what they were doing earlier.
Yeah. And they have the Defiant too, which I feel like this ship has come up 3 or 4 times, and I never remember what the story is. So if you could enlighten me as to what the story behind this ship is again, please.
We just rewatched Tholian Web on Patreon for this, maybe a month or 2 ago. But that's where they the Tholians have their web, and then there's the Defiant, which phases out of existence, and they wonder where it went in TOS. They don't figure out where it went at the end of the show. But this is just it. Showing up here, it both goes to the mirror universe and conveniently goes back in time at the same time, so that it can end up here. I think Discovery's only references that they bring up the Defiant that it happened, that this has happened to that ship before. When they go into the mirror universe, it's their examination of that.
Well, they shouldn't know that, right?
Discovery is 5 years before TOS, so they should. Well,
either way, I mean, they don't have. It never comes back, right?
No, it never comes back. How do they know that?
Anyway, again, let's not jump into season 1 of Discovery.
Not dwell on Discovery. That might have been a weird mistake. It might have been. Anyway, to get back to what makes this a kind of unique and interesting mirror universe thing, there is no need to show Batman's parents being killed. They say we don't need prime characters in this universe. Everyone knows what the mirror universe is. We don't need to have our characters stumble into this universe and go, what the hell? Is this some kind of mirror universe that we found ourselves in? They go with it. I think it saves a tremendous amount of time, and it makes it all the more effective to never see your original characters. The downside here, this means that in the last 5 episodes of Enterprise, 3 of the episodes do not feature any of the real characters of the show.
Really?
The finale and this 2-parter.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the finale is a holodeck thing.
Yep. Which is weird. That's very weird.
Yeah. Well, going out swinging, I guess.
Did you miss the prime characters?
Yes and no. No, because again, I feel like, and it feels to me sometimes like the people who were doing Discovery like only watched Enterprise or something.
Yeah.
Because you can do this episode in the 4th season of your show because you've had 3 seasons preceding it where you are introduced to all these other characters. You know what they're like, you know how they act, you know what their relationships are. So mirror universe, okay, you can see what the difference is.
Yeah.
And Discovery, the way that they handled it, at least in the first run through, is you don't have any real basis of comparison to understand why these characters are acting differently than they do in the main universe. Like there's that whole thing where Tilly is actually evil or whatever, and it's like, I don't understand what they're doing here because you never meet evil Tilly, so I don't understand what the difference is. You're just showing me half of that equation.
Yep.
But you can do it here because you have that basis of knowing everything before you get to this point. However,
Before you get to your however point, I see that in small moments like there's a mirror universe. Phlox and T'Pol have a meal together scene, which they haven't done in a couple seasons, but they used to do that pretty consistently. And it was kind of neat to see evil Phlox and evil T'Pol have a conversation about that. It is, I think that's what this episode, this two-parter succeeds at, is that it, in the sense that you're saying, because we know these characters for 4 seasons, you can actually have interestingly twisted versions of those characters having scenes that are exactly the way that they would play on the original show, but they're different and they show you something about it. I thought it was kind of neat.
Yeah. My however is just that, the mirror universe, and this is sort of like a 2-leveled however, like a surface however that leads to not necessarily however, if that makes sense. The mirror universe is usually best utilized as presenting a thematic comparison for to help the prime characters learn something, or the audience to learn something different about these characters, right? Here, you don't get that directly, but what you do get is what you're talking about, where you're getting these comparisons because you know these characters and you see how things are different and you see how things are laying out. But I think what's lacking from it is you get to see these different versions, but they are ultimately kind of felt like they were a little bit empty because they didn't really amount to anything other than just kind of showing you the alternate version. Like I do think thematically there are some interesting things going on, but I don't know. I think you could push it a little further as far as what they're trying to say. I think the focus there.
I don't know if I would disagree. I don't know if I disagree or if I kind of agree, but I think that the focus from the episode is less about the characters. The characters are played for more vignette scenes where their interactions don't really matter. It's more kind of like a cute little sketch about how a darker version of the original relationship would work. But what I do think they do is that the true thematic mirror here is the formation of the Federation / Terran Empire. It's that sense of like, and why I think that it works is because we've been complaining about in the Prime universe through Enterprise, the founding of the Federation has felt a little bit underwhelming and kind of like half baked and not really as galactic or big of an event as you would expect. Similarly, the founding of the Terran Empire is like Archer flying around on a ship and he's like, now I'm in charge. This is how we do things. And so it feels thematically like a match in a weird way to Enterprise, where neither of them are particularly impressive events, but it's kind of neat to just see the different paths that, like, even down to the opening credits, which we haven't talked, like in the original Prime universe, the opening credits are all about exploration and going out into the stars and mankind's development. Here it's about the development of weaponry and warfare in the Terran Empire. Right. So I think that it matches it nicely there. And so I think that the show has less to say about the characters and more to just be like, the two universes started similarly in a different way, and which isn't particularly deep. I don't think it has anything to say that I'm like, oh, I'm going to think about that for a little while. But I thought that they matched each other in a mirror universe kind of way that was nice and better than a lot of other mirror universe stuff does.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like the scene with T'Pol and the other Vulcan guy whose name escapes me. I also like...
He's got a goatee.
I like that they gave him a goatee. That was very nice. I was kind of hoping they would give Reed the goatee because I feel like he would be a good evil English goatee.
Yeah,
guy.
It shows how bad of a Star Trek fan is. I completely forgot it's just a Vulcan thing in the mirror universe to where it had the goatee.
Oh, is that what it is? It's just a Vulcan
male
thing?
Vulcans, have the goatees.
Ah, okay. Well, it's become so ubiquitous in pop culture outside of that evil version means goatee that it's easy to forget.
Yep.
Yeah, I liked what they were doing there with some of the Vulcan stuff. That scene with him and T'Pol was nice. I like that they kill a lot of people. That's the fun thing about these alternate universes. You can just start killing people.
Is there something charming about the fact that T'Pol's plan fails?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what you can do in these episodes is you can have them blow it and end up getting killed for it or whatever.
Yeah.
I liked I liked Trip's Two-Face makeup. I thought that was kind of fun. Apparently the radiation seal on the Mirror Universe engine is not as tight as it is on the Prime Universe engine.
Not as concerned about it. Yeah, he's physically scarred. Reed is a Mako in this, which is something we'd been saying should have been happening from the start of the series.
Yep.
He's actually more dedicated of a military man. Another small universe thing. Reed invents the force field in the Prime Universe in one of the earlier seasons, and now he invents the agony booth in the. It's one of those small. Right. It's like everyone we have to know invents these things. Although,
I wish they had a moment where when they were on the Defiant, the red alert thing goes off and it said red alert, and he went, red alert. Damn it!
Damn it!
I was so close.
I don't think there's much to say about the agony booth, really. It's necessary to be in there. Phlox I enjoyed, who has gone from being an animal collector to now he just basically vivisects live animals, it looks like. He sort of tortures live animals. He tortures the Tholian to death in this one. I thought that they were good. Again, it's this thing where I don't think they're really saying a lot about the characters in this universe, but I thought that just the flip of them was kind of interesting to watch. This was it was a weird Enterprise multi-episode arc in that for all of the other multi-episode Enterprise arcs, when I got to the end of the first episode, I was never like, I'm going to watch the second one right now. I've always been like, okay, I'll watch that one later. This one was the only one where I was like, I'd like to see how this plays out. This has kind of got a great ending going on here. The Tholian Web, in contrast to the TOS episode, actually seems like a devastating weapon in this one because you can do it quickly and it makes sense.
Yeah, instead of a arcade machine on the Fritz.
In the TOS, the ship had to be disabled so that they could spin the web around it. This one, they just shoot it like lasers.
And it's super slow, if I remember correctly from the TOS.
It's one ship just going across the screen.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't 100% sure, but I was in my head. I was like, it's like Galaga or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boop, 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 boop. Now spin. Boop.
It takes off. Never hits the corner of your screen. This one, it makes it effective. They can trap it. They trap a ship, and then they just shoot the shit out of it, resulting in Admiral Forrest deciding to stay behind and giving the greatest ship is blowing up around him sequence I've ever seen, because that looked fantastic when he's pounding away at the keys as the whole ship is blowing up around him. Good stuff. Anything else? I feel like there's stuff to do about the theme, but maybe not. Is this just a lighter episode than I'm thinking it is? Is it just...
Well, I think one of the reasons it probably works as one of the better, if not second best Mirror episode is because it's focused in that it is answering a what if question, right? Like the DS9 episodes feel really unfocused because it's just like it's the last week at summer stock camp and everybody's playing different roles and vamping it up.
Every season they went back too. It's like
and end of the season, let's have some fun. Episode where they just let Avery Brooks off the leash completely.
Whenever people start getting too high on DS9, you should remind them that in the 7th season, their last season, they had a mirror universe that was already running out of gas and said, let's also make this a Ferengi episode at the same time. And they combined both horrible running plots into one single one.
But, and Discovery, I think, Discovery thinks it's doing something interesting, but it's really not.
Right.
Because it's not really answering any questions or positing any interesting concepts. Whereas this one is answering a question, which is, as you're saying, well, what if things went differently when the Vulcans made first contact?
Yeah.
And how does that lead into what ultimately becomes the Terran Empire?
Yeah. That's another, like, I'm probably forgetting a lot of these because it's 2 episodes and we're trying to cram it into one podcast, but like Archer's explanation of, like, I think that this episode really succeeds in this moment when he's talking to T'Pol at the very start and he says, imagine if when you came to Earth, you had been our conquerors, because in the Terran mindset, they're being invaded by the Vulcans at that point. And it just so nicely mirrors early Archer, where his hatred of the Vulcans was built around being held back. But Mirror Archer has the same distrust and hatred of the Vulcans, but because he thinks they're an invading army. And it's this nice... both characters are the same, but their outlook is totally different, and it results in this totally separate splintering of like their interactions with the characters that they're accusing of being either enemies or people who are trying to hold them back or something. I think all that stuff works really well, and even if it doesn't give you a totally different outlook on Archer or anything like that, it's a kind of, you can see multiple stories that have the same beats, but they go in different directions, which is just kind of a neat writing exercise, if anything, outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a nice job. And I will say that T'Pol with long hair in a TOS uniform is a pretty good look.
Yep. Yeah, the long hair should have been a thing. She looks a little bit elfish, but outside of that,
she doesn't really look like a what are they called? Vulcan, yeah. They
I liked their costuming here. To get back into like the is this inappropriately sexy thing. I appreciate the, like, Discovery would never do that TOS costuming look, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not a show of an era where that would be really allowable. But it's like I look at this thing and they're clearly riffing on, because Uhura had to wear the midriff thing in the 60s show. Like that's where they're getting these fashion choices from. I would agree with you that they should have ripped the sleeves off of all their shirts to make the men actually look legitimate in this universe. But it was I appreciated that they so faithfully followed the original design, especially because it's so obviously feeding into that type of a thing. And
right.
The only other way to this is kind of an awkward segue, but just to get to the final point before I think we can wrap it up. The final bit of cleverness is I like the idea that the Defiant went back in time, and it's kind of like Star Trek 2009, where a mining ship is now the most powerful ship that's ever been seen before because it's advanced.
Yeah.
The Defiant is an old shitty Constitution class or whatever those things were called, but against 100 years prior, this thing is like the warship of all warships that they've ever encountered.
Yeah, it's like that thing everyone always at some point says. It's like, man, what if you went back in time and brought like an M16 to the Civil War? You could probably defeat either side by yourself on like one clip of ammo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was the because I saw online that some people were like, I don't think 100 years of technology is all that big of a deal.
Listen, okay, sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but look at the difference in technology between, especially war technology, between 1914 and 1918, and then tell me that 100 years is not that big of a difference in technology.
No, I mean, you would just say, have a modern Abrams tank brought back to World War I, and it would single-handedly win the war, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had a modern, like, Raptor fighter jet against like the Red Baron planes, World War II or something.
Oh yeah,
it just wouldn't stand a chance. And
you might stand a chance because it would be like in The Simpsons when Sideshow Bob holds the air show hostage and he takes off at the end in the old biplane, and they send the jets after them, and they can't catch him because he's too slow.
Right,
they just keep buzzing by him and can't actually catch up with him.
That's true. You'd have to get your strafing done correctly. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, one F-15 or whatever loaded with bombs could take over the entire world in 1900. You kidding me?
Yep. So I think it works. I think that's totally acceptable. Anything else, or should we go to final thoughts or the patron thoughts, which will probably spur some stuff? We have a couple of comments. It was about 10 of them. People are interested in this one.
Well, I guess I was just thinking, like, do you feel like this is too much? Like, the idea is nice, right? But do you think it's too much of just a fan service shotgun blast? And I don't know if it's because we've kind of been doing that stuff already in this season, and we're so close to the end, and like the last couple things were
the Klingon
the
virus.
Vulcan thing, the Klingon thing, tying up all these other things that aren't necessary. And then they go into this, which is like, not only is it like a what if it was different thing, it's a mirror episode. Plus they literally go onto a TOS ship. You know, we gave Discovery a lot of shit for playing that card. I mean, I guess they did it at the end of the first season, but still. The Gorn is in it. For some reason, every time the Gorn is mentioned now, I feel like it's like, ugh, do we really need to talk about the Gorn again?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, so here's my conflict here. I don't know how well you remember it, but what separates Trials and Tribulations, the DS9 homage, where they go back in time and they're walking around in the background of the Trouble with Tribbles episode? Yep. What separates that episode, which I think we both gave 5s, from this one?
I think it's context more than anything else for me, because when that episode showed up on DS9, it wasn't in the middle of a string of, hey, please keep watching, remember these things that you know.
Sure.
And it was such a gimmick episode, like they went so far into it that you can't kind of help but be charmed by it. Whereas this one, I'm not so sure, especially because the Mirror Universe episodes have such a history of being hit or miss and kind of like played out and whatnot.
Yeah, Tribulations is not a Mirror Universe episode, obviously, because they just go back in time.
Right. And so I was just watching it with that kind of in the back of my head, where I was like, I don't know, this is a nice idea, but is this an honest episode, or is this a let's take another swing at the fence? Hopefully we can get more people to watch this in the last 5 weeks it's on. Yeah.
I think that before I go to that point, I think for me the difference between Tribulations and this one is that I really think that the execution of Tribulations is super clever. Like, I think that it's kind of neat to have all that stuff. This does not feel as clever as that.
This has more of the modern things that people harp on, where it's like Archer comes out wearing the green wraparound thing, and they're like, "Oh, where did you get that crazy shirt?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is what the captains wear. Isn't it wild?" You know? That's the kind of stuff people get annoyed by now, because it happens all the time.
In a larger sense, what people like about the 4th season of Enterprise is this stuff where there's this aggressive connection to TOS. I think the only thing that excuses it for me is that the show is dead in the water at this point. So why not? Yeah. Like, you're not really trying to prove anything. However, on a creative level, I would still say you should try to make the best show that Enterprise could be at this point. Like, I understand what you're doing, but I would rather you try to make great Enterprise episodes and stop with this fan stuff, because as we've been talking about in previous episodes, I'm now seeing this is the franchise bending over backwards to fillet itself, right? Like, it is just constantly referencing things. And this is the start of the Mirror. It's not the start of the Mirror Universe, because DS9 did it first, but it's the start of just like bringing up the Mirror Universe just because it's a thing. Like, there's only 5 things in Star Trek that apparently can get referenced at this point. The Klingon augment felt the same way. It's like, I don't need to know this. This is not necessary. You don't have to. You don't have to talk about this stuff. So I'm conflicted about Enterprise, because they knew what they were. They knew they were just trying to give fans what they wanted. But I think at the same time, that's really sacrificing your creative license to, not in a bad way, but you've really given up on your show at that point, and it's not about Enterprise anymore. And I see it really as a turning point in the franchise. I think all the stuff that came after this is somewhat influenced, at least, by what Enterprise was trying to do with its dying breath.
Yeah. What you're all really going to hate is in about 6 weeks or so, or 4 weeks, when after I give this episode I don't know, it feels like they're putting too much old shit into this, when I give the finale a glowing review, even though it's literally takes place on a different show.
We're so close to the end of Enterprise. It'll be sad.
Yeah.
We'll have some wrap-up thoughts about it. Yeah, but that's my... So just to push it back on you, what do you feel about the way that Enterprise has approached this final season and specifically this? Is this too much fan service?
I think I agree that, show's dead in the water. What the hell? May as well. At this point, I'm sure the future of the franchise was very much in doubt.
Yeah.
This was the last thing for 4 or 5 years. I guess this is 2003, 2004.
This is 2005. This came out, so 4 years until Star Trek.
4 years. Which if you remember, that used to feel like an eternity.
I know.
Like 5 years. If Star Trek was not on TV for 5 years, it was like the franchise is dead. Yep.
Well, to be fair, leading into this point, it had been constantly on TV since '87. There was
That's
always
true.
a series running.
Yeah, but I guess like in terms of, if you think about it in terms of like movie franchises and stuff,
yes.
There used to be routinely 3 to 5 years between movies. Like what I didn't even realize is there was a 7-year gap between Alien and Aliens, which is crazy because in my mind it's like, oh yeah, they must have made that like 2 years later because that's what they do now.
Yep.
They make all these movies, like they start making them before the other one comes out. But it's so funny to me that looking back, this 4-year gap after Enterprise was done, it was like, Star Trek's dead, it's never coming back. But I know that wasn't just the time. I'm sure it was also just like the fact that Enterprise just nobody was watching it for 4 years. So maybe it's more like 8 years had
and
passed
Nemesis
because no one was watching.
The Nemesis movie was a bomb,
yeah.
and that was years before this. Enterprise was just kind of limping along. It is surprising it was only 4 years to get to that because it did feel, when that 2009 movie came out, I was like, Star Trek's back from the grave. It's like Star Trek hadn't been on for like 2 years, but it felt like it had been gone forever. I didn't watch Enterprise at the time, so it felt longer. So for me, it would have been the 8 years from Nemesis, which would have been a decent amount of time to not have any new Star Trek.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that definitely fit. And that's the thing, too. Like, I wasn't watching Enterprise. I you know what? I didn't even see Nemesis in the theater. I don't think I saw it until much, much later. So the last new Star Trek thing that I watched was First Contact.
Yeah.
And so as far as I was concerned, and some of Voyager, but not much of Voyager. So as far as I was concerned, it was gone. The first season of Voyager was the newest thing I had watched. But yeah, in and of itself, if I'm being fair to it, the way that I was that I was trying to be fair to the other ones with this stuff, I think they pull it out in the second half, which is weird because as I said, the middle feels like they're not sure what to do, and it is these sort of like vignettes and stuff. But I think overall, it is saved by what they're trying to do in showing the mirror creation of the Terran Empire to mirror the creation of the Federation. But yeah, for a while as I was watching it, I was like, I'm not really sure if this feels kind of throwaway to me because it's a lot of, hey, look at this, hey, look at this. It's a story that at first isn't ultimately clear exactly where it's going. The plot's kind of hard to track. But as a whole, you kind of take a step back and go like, all right, I see what they're trying to do. So I think I would have liked if they had been able to do it in a less fan servicey way, but also, I like seeing the old shit as much as anybody else. I think now, I guess that's something that's kind of, I don't know if we ever talked about that, because it's like, is there a difference to you between needlessly tying up loose ends to connect things and just literally showing you the old shit again? As far as like how tacky it is to do?
Which one, like which I would prefer to see?
Yeah.
Well, so the way that I would think about that is that I appreciate the tying up of loose ends, but I think it's unnecessary. What's interesting is that I think there is a way to see old shit and be impressed by it, which I'm thinking of when in the motion picture, when Kirk just luxuriates in 8 minutes of looking at the new model of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
That is kind of cool, right? Because that's an upgraded version of what you used to know. So you're like, oh man, this looks fantastic. Like, look at this thing.
Right.
And it had been off the air for, the decade or whatever it was. From seeing a hastily thrown together remock of the Enterprise bridge on Enterprise that's not really the same thing. That doesn't give me any kind of like, oh man, it's like they're sitting right where James Tiberius Kirk stood. It's like, well, good on them for throwing this together in 3 days.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, I was like, do they just have this set ready to go over at Paramount or something? Because they must have, maybe they kept it after they did Trials and Tribulations and it's the same set or something. I don't know.
I think this is the largest recreation, where the previous shows, like in TNG, there's the Relics episode, they only built a very small sliver of it, and they kept the angle very tight on it. And I think that this is almost a total recreation of the entire original set. So that's unusual for itself. But that would be my
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask you if like the do you what's like something you enjoy seeing? Like, do you still get any kind of? I feel like it's an adolescent thing. I don't get chills from seeing old stuff in new things anymore. Like I could watch the original at this point. It's not really interesting to me.
For me it's what you're doing with it and the story you're telling, and I think I prefer that. Oddly enough, saying with my criticism of this episode, I prefer that to tying up loose ends that nobody asked you to tie up, because I feel like that feels more like grasping at straws to me than how do we use the old stuff and the reverence or lack of reverence for that stuff in a new way. Like the idea that the Terran Empire was started because evil Hoshi got control of a ship that was 100 years from 100 years in the future. That's a pretty interesting way to do that kind of thing. I find that more interesting than, well, we should probably explain why the Klingons don't have bumps on their heads, or but even there, as I said when we were covering those episodes, I think the story they were trying to tell was interesting, but they lean too much into that element. Yeah. And same with the Vulcans, where it's like the story you're telling is now in service of explaining this stuff that you decided to use instead of using the stuff to do something kind of fun and new.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just my final thought would be, I think Enterprise has literally walked the tightrope in this season, where it doesn't feel particularly egregious to me, but I'm kind of like, I wish you hadn't done this all that bad, but sure. I don't think this is terrible what you did, but at the same time, it's not really what I would have expected out of it. So I think in that regard, they succeeded. And again, to me, season 4 is not a tremendous change in quality for this show. It's just that they changed their focus on the material, but otherwise, this feels, when we're complaining that this doesn't feel like this has much to say about the formation of the Terran Empire, that's kind of what Enterprise does. Like, Enterprise doesn't have a lot to say about its things. This is just a well-executed idea.
What's funny, though, is actually it's the one time where the Bang Bang shoot 'em up third act didn't bother me, because it's like, well, yeah, that's what it would be like. That's in the Terran Empire. They would just start shooting each other. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. All right, so that's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll go to patron thoughts in a little bit. But first, if you want to leave your patron thoughts, you have to become a patron at patreon.com/thepensky-file. It's the best way to support this show and the other shows on the network, if you want to call it that. Clay and Amanda have real Rotten Horror Picture Show. There's Badass. All these things are supported through Patreon, patreon.com/thepensky-file. A couple dollars a month, you get extra stuff. Extra podcasts. We do sci-fi movies. We do Star Trek revisits. We do random genre films. We did Tombstone. We do polls that people can vote on what they want to see covered. We have access to the Discord on there. If you're a captain tier, you can
we did Little Discord. Women.
We did Little Women.
Don't forget Little Women,
which was a good podcast.
We've done everything from RoboCop to Little Women on the Patreon.
There's a wide berth of stuff that we can go to. There's 100 plus podcasts. It's the best way to support the show. Patreon.com/The Penske File. And as always, our Captain tier supporters get a special thank you. So a special thank you goes to Samuel Custer, Tark Latif, Joint Mango, Andrew Sherlock, Cal Barrett, Mike Burnett, Matthew Russ, Christian Pouch, Brendan Howells, Matt Cutler, Michael Pond, Nick Sergey, Britton, Grim Santo, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Vault 13 Hero, Darth Moss, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elwood, Stephen Minton, HH28, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jake123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Nick the Rat, Dave Davies, Grapple, John Zorn, Check Captain Brazen, Eric Santuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Bardeur, Retail, Dizbretta, Tom Hickey, Ed Mark Starr, Jose Hunter, ZW, Enough Remixes, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Beal, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Chris McLaughlin, Chase Jackson, Matt Burke, and Rage for the Machine. I don't know if they hear. I think they signed up after that podcast came up, so that was just an interesting coincidence. That's it. Thank you all for supporting the show so generously and for funding Voyager, which is coming up post haste. But first, Clay, we'll go to patron comments.
Back into the shit.
Kyle Barrett says 7 seasons of Voyager. I might be dead before that finishes. Kyle Barrett says, in a mirror, darkly. I'd argue this is the best Mirror Universe story. I'm just going to move this over just so I can look at it right here. I'd argue this is the best Mirror Universe story of the franchise because it actually offers an interesting inverse of the regular show. Instead of the season's usual concern of showing the early days of the Federation mindset where alliances are starting to form, we see how the Terran Empire turned into a truly terrible and powerful form from TOS and Discovery. Maybe my interpretation is wrong, but while the Terrans are evil from the start, their society still seemingly has a more respected chain of command and a place for other species in their service more than simple slavery, especially under Forrest's command, who seems like a nice a guy as a Terran can get. And then Archer and presumably Empress Hoshi usher in the next level of backstabbing, fascism, oppression, and warmongering, truly creating the opposite of the regular Season 4 Enterprise, specifically the next 2 eps. I also love how the Prime Universe is important to events indirectly, with Mirror Archer having regular Archer be the angel on his shoulder, but because of the moral inverse, he perceives him as the devil. The second episode is far superior to the first, even with the terrible scene of Archer elbowing a CGI Gorn in the face, and I'm shocked that the sets look so good considering the budget, although those bright lights on the Defiant must be hurting everybody's sensitive eyes. 5 silhouetted sex scenes out of 5.
Yeah, there were so many sex scenes in this that they ran out of ways to shoot them. They had to shoot them. They shot them differently every time.
I thought that was going to be your Room Connection, where they just show the same sex scene twice.
Well, that too. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of. Well, at least this one, as disgusting as those room sex scenes are, there's something almost worse in the how do we do this on network television thing, where it's always just like hard cut to them both going, ugh, and like they're like sweaty. Yeah, it's kind of unsettling. I did honestly the silhouette scene where it was really dark. I actually liked that one.
No, it's cool. Really they never broke the thing. It was just a neat directorial choice because it shows you the background of the sets and everything like that.
There's only so much Vaseline you could smear all over Scott Bakula before you got to think of something new.
My I think I mentioned this on this. My favorite trope of sex scenes in TV and movies is that after the deed is done, the guy rolls over and he's like, ugh. He's like, I got to get back to the office. And he just gets up and like puts his suit on. He's like, he's got sex filth all over him. And he's just like, I'll just puts my underwear back on and get the hell out of here. That's always funny to me. What's the next comment here? It disappeared because I moved. In a Mirror Darkly from Russell Elledge. New Trek writers, you can't have the 60s style in modern Star Trek. Manikoto, hold my beer. I absolutely love this episode. So much camp, overacting, and hamming it up by the actors. You can tell they were having a great time. I found it clever that it's both a prequel and a sequel to TOS, and it's just plain fun. And remember, my friends, great men are not peacemakers. Great men are conquerors. It's true. Matt Ross says, probably the best Mirror Universe adaptation out of all the series, starting with the recreation of the ending of First Contact to the tie-in with TOS's Tholian Web to get the Defiant and the swashbuckling good time. It was enjoyable. The changed opening titles, turning the font black into the alternate violent history, was a brilliant and welcome relief from the crap twonky theme song. Seeing the evil analogs, the scars, the scheming, the skimpy outfits, and the use of sex as a weapon, as well as the twist with the manipulative Hoshi was fun. The fact that the rise of the all-powerful Empire was dependent on a weird TOS episode was a great idea. Manikoto's mad dash to make a show that ties in with TOS and the rest of Star Trek is again shown to be well handled. 5 Hail the Empires out of 5. Opening credits were great until the little CGI astronaut on the moon.
Yes.
That was... they might as well have had Microsoft's Clippy come out and say, it looks like you're trying to plant a flag on this thing.
Yeah.
That was terrible. I wish they hadn't done that.
You couldn't have taken half a lunch break to shoot an extra in one of those suits, like waving.
That's true, because he is just wearing those little spacesuits that they wear, isn't he? Poindexter G says, best cold open ever, and don't skip the theme song for once. It's great to see the TOS era sets, props, and costumes, including Uhura's earpiece and Kirk's green tunic. I particularly like Archer's Kirk pose on the captain's chair. This is really the only other foray into the Mirror Universe that truly captures the feel of Mirror Mirror. DS9 going a very different direction with it, and the less said about Discovery, the better. The minor Mirror characters we see here also have understandable motivations, with our Prime Universe characters simply being an influence on them. Royo says, this may be my favorite episode of the franchise. Goodness, and favorite intro to a Star Trek show.
Wow. All right.
What I really liked about this two-parter is that they weren't ashamed of the TOS era design, but neither were they faithful to a fault, as the original set had fake-looking backlit paper screens instead of computers displays, and I believe it was the right move to make an old-era bridge more realistic-looking without altering the design aesthetic. Modernism, minimalism has been the prevailing art style of society since the 30s and has typically been used to portray the future, including JJ's Enterprise and Disco's Enterprise. While the original TOS set design was a rebellion against modernism. In many ways, Ent's version of the TOS era appears more futuristic to me, with a computer display and technical readouts appearing pronominally in colors red, green, yellow, and blue, which I find suitably disorienting to my modern eyes. They are very weird looking. While the plot is silly, the fact that this story is a wholehearted embrace of the franchise and even fitting perfectly into canon shows the passion that went behind making this episode, and it kind of highlights how DS9, to my disappointment, was trying to distance itself from all that by giving Cisco's Defiant the registry number NX74205 instead of NCC 1764A. 5 out of 5. Favorite of the franchise. Right. I wonder if that's a typo, if you mean series or franchise. Franchise is a powerful word to use in that situation. I would accept series, I think. Not that I don't accept franchise, but it makes more sense to me.
Unacceptable.
You'll have to let us know, Royo, if that is actually your favorite of the franchise or the series. Jakey's Gamer says, I know it's pure fan service, but I like it. It's fun, meaningless romp that hits nostalgic beats in the way that I find very satisfying. That said, as someone who spent time chronicling all of the Star Trek episodes chronologically, these episodes, along with TOS's The Tholian Web and Discovery's Despite Yourself, make up the one time in all of Trek we find a time loop of episodes, making them hard to place canonically, and for that, I hate these episodes, but I still love them. 5 Defiants out of 5. Grapple John Zorn says, In a Mirror Darkly fan service checklist, Mirror Universe, check. Goatee, check. Gorn, check. Tholians, check. Tholian Web, check. Gratuitous helpings of midriff, check. Chick fight with gratuitous midriff-oriented camera angles, check. Full-on OG Constitution class blowing shit up like a boss, check. Hand phaser incineration, check. Wait, is this first contact? Check. Putting the Ho in Hoshi, check. 92 straight minutes of reminding us that Bakula was miscast, check. 5 out of 5 from the old school fanboy, check.
I think that her name is blanking on me.
Hoshi?
Paul. What's her name?
Jolene Blaylock.
Jolene Blaylock has the longest torso I've ever seen, and it's accentuated so much by the midriff thing.
Yeah,
where she's so thin,
yeah.
But it seems like it's just very long.
I feel I noticed it most when she had her season 1 cat suit, which was like that camo-ish looking color.
Oh, sure.
That seemed to accentuate her body the most. That like showed how sort of unusually shaped she is. What I thought was funny, there's a tremendous amount of midriff in this episode. There's also an extremely large amount of unflattering, the camera is at their waist as they're sitting down shots on them in the midriff, which they're all beautiful women and they're in great shape, but no one's belly looks terrific when you're sitting down. So you're gonna have some rolls right there. I always thought that was funny. If I was those two, I would have asked, can the camera go Elsewhere, really? Here? This is not the best place. Captain Brazen says, in a mirror darkly, thank the prophets, the Cisco, or whoever Manny Cotto had to screw to make this glorious masterpiece of smoked ham. Part 1's First Contact throwback was a great inversion of the Prime universes, and nothing else says welcome to Bozeman, Montana better than a shotgun blast to the chest. The Mirror Universe style, as we know from TOS and not DS9, is on full display and dialed up to 11 with the swashbuckling, backstabbing, sabotaging, and paranoid delusions of gaining more power. My wife and I don't care for Archer as a captain, so seeing Mirror Archer's death, though a bit predictable in this universe, was rewardingly cathartic. My favorite Easter egg in these episodes is that the TOS phaser being used by Archer is in fact a toy replica that was being sold on store shelves at the time. 5 original really? Constitution-class starship kicking alien ass out of 5. 2 more.
That's fun.
Christian Pouch says, a ridiculously stupid, overacted, and very fun episode. It's blatant fan service and has no point to it, but it's enjoyable. I put it above the later DS9 Mirror Universe episodes because we know it's a one-off with nothing to lose and we can accept the absurdity, and above Disco Mirror Universe because they're not really trying to rehabilitate Psycho Hitler Archer. 5 out of 5 until the fun feeling wears off. And final comment, Brandon Howell says, in a mirror darkly, the only episode of Enterprise where I don't skip the theme song. Far too silly, but too much fun to care. Phlox does enjoy his work too much. And look, they finally found a perfect use for Travis. The best Mirror Universe episode in all of Trek, in my opinion. 4.5 Hoshi versus T'Pol catfights out of 5. Thank you, patrons.
I will say, between the earring and the hair and the uniform, every time they cut to Travis, I was like, he looks like he's in Shalimar or something, or like Cameo. And it's a great look. He looks really good.
No, he looks good in the Mirror Universe. Yeah, I wish as you were saying, he didn't have his sleeves on, because I'd be like, this guy's the Mirror Universe guard if I've ever seen one.
Yeah. It's like they're on the first shot, it's Star Trek on the Enterprise, and then they cut to him and it's the China Club in 1987.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts. Apparently, it just takes an episode that everyone really loves to get a bunch of comments. I think people's gas was running out by the end of Enterprise here. Thank you very much.
We'll have between 0 and 3 comments per episode for
Voyager.
5 seasons of Voyager. Whatever.
People love. I'll be interested to see how our numbers do with Voyager.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Voyager gets people. People care about Voyager in a way they don't care about Enterprise, I think. We'll see, though. I
just can't wait for Kate Mulgrew's Russian accent.
Yeah. I can't wait for, we talked in the thing. I'm going to, if people are tired about my Vulcan points, wait until Tuvok shows up, and I'm going to be like, look at this specimen of a Vulcan, not emoting whatsoever, doing exactly what I expect him to do. Tuvok's a great Vulcan. All right, so that's it. Thank you, patrons. Clay, on our scale of 1 to 5, how are you going to rate this one? We'll give it 1 rating. We're not rating each individual episodes, although if you want to give the thought process, if they're averaging out in your head in some way, feel free.
I will give them combined, I think I'll give them a 4.
Okay. Which episode did you like better?
I don't know. It's a tough call because, like I said, I like the first act and I like the last act. In the middle, I was kind of could take or leave.
Yeah. Kyle surprised me. He said he liked the second one much better than the first one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think it's so obvious. I liked the first one the first one felt like it was its own thing before it got really into fan service, is what I liked about the first part.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Because it's interesting because like when you got something like this, I feel like it's almost that ship being in the past is almost so big of a deal that it needs to be like the one thing you do, because if it's like that, plus there's a Gorn, plus there's this, plus there's then you can kind of get overwhelmed by it instead of like, so you don't really focus on how big a deal it is. Like, oh shit, there's 100 ship from 100 years in the future back in the past.
Yep.
But yeah, I think they have a lot of fun with it, and I do think it's better than the other Mirror Universe episodes because it is more focused and it is kind of about something. So I'll give it a 4.
The one thing that struck me that I didn't have time to mention, I'll mention it here. They would have the Tholians would have saved, whoever stole the Defiant would have saved themselves a lot of trouble if they'd have put a door on the front of the cave that it was in, so that you can't just see the ship.
Oh, yeah.
sitting in there.
Or just, put a bigger rock in front of it or something.
Just one of those shower curtains at the dentist's office that you can pull across. There's just nothing to see here, folks. Is this a top 5 Enterprise episode for you? I know you don't know the episodes off the top of your head, but would you be like, this is one of the better 4s, or is this just a okay episode for you?
That's a really good question.
While you're thinking about it, I'm going to give it a 4, and it's definitely top 5 Enterprise for me, I think. I think that maybe 3 of the best 5 episodes of the series have come in this last season. I think it's this, Observer Effect, and that was the other one that I really liked. Now, of course, I can't remember whatever that one was. But Bound. I like Bound, too, and no one seemed to like that one. But I like those 3. This one, it did feel, while I was watching this, I enjoyed watching this one in a way that I have not really enjoyed watching Enterprise episodes before. I was kind of riveted by it in a way that I don't think the quality is much better than a lot of Enterprise episodes, but it did feel, in a way, this was one of the most fun episodes this season in trying to do a canon thing. Sure. And it held my attention in a lot of different ways. And I would definitely show this to somebody if they were like, what's the Mirror universe about? I'd say watch Mirror, Mirror, and then this one. Those are the 2. So I think it's important. I think it's a good episode, and I think it's one of Enterprise's better at this point.
Yeah. I don't know if I would put it in the top 5, only because I don't know. It's tough because, is this one of the better episodes in general? Generally speaking, probably yes. But, when I think about Enterprise and what Enterprise is about, I don't know if I would really think about this episode.
It's true.
Because, and I think that's kind of what turns me off a little bit about it in general, is that it feels more gimmicky because it doesn't feel overall it feels in line with what they're trying to do, again, because it's the origin of the Empire is mirroring them, blah blah blah. But I don't know. I feel like there are other episodes that are more in line with the show that they set up, and what they were trying to do with the show than this. If that makes sense.
No, that's fair. I would probably feel the same way if someone said that Trials and Tribulations was the top 5 DS9. I'd say that's a good episode, but
right.
I don't know if that is appropriate.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, excuse me. It's kind of the same logic I apply to why I take a couple ticks off of City on the Edge of Forever, because it's it's a great science fiction story. It's really well done, but it doesn't. When I think about Star Trek and all of the Star Trek things and what they were trying to do with that show, that's not what I think of. I think of something like Balance of Terror.
Yeah.
So with that kind of same criteria, I don't think I would put this in the top 5 Enterprise episodes.
We'll see how I feel by the end of it. I'll probably give a top 5 at some point. Maybe not do an episode, but come up with something. But go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm done.
Well, I was just going to say this is going to be a tough recap if we do a recap, because I can't remember if we usually do those together, or do you do them by yourself?
No, we do them together. For Enterprise, we've been doing them together.
It's going to be a tough series recap because it's only 4 seasons, but I feel like we've been doing it for 8 years. And so, I can barely remember anything that happened in this show. So it's going to be interesting. I'm
going to rely heavily on patron feedback. It might be one of those things where I organize the episode, our conversation around patrons, what patrons think about it, because they'll probably spark my memory. It does feel like we've been doing, and it's just not to hate on it, Enterprise feels the same in a lot. It feels like it's been a very workmanlike, monotonous series that we've gone through. That's it. We both give it 4s, although I think we're slightly on different ends of the spectrum of a 4. I like this one. I thought it was good. Clay thinks it's also very good, but maybe not one of the better ones. In a Mirror Darkly, we'll see how this all wraps up. We've got only 2 episodes of regular Enterprise left before the finale, and they are a 2-parter called Terra Prime and Demons, or Demons and Terra Prime are the 2 of them.
We only got 2 more before the finale?
Yep, 3 more episodes of Enterprise total.
Wow. Okay.
close to the end, and everyone's favorite actor, Peter Weller, is in the next two. He's the villain.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah. So
how does that line up with continuity?
I know.
He's the bad guy in Into Darkness.
Yep.
Ugh, jeez. Can they get anything right?
He's the mirror universe guy. He's going to come. He comes back with the ship whenever it comes back, and he's on it, and he's ready to go. So that's it. Thank you very much, patrons, for leaving your thoughts. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Much appreciated. We will be back with Demons. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go? This has been a long episode, but it is a two-parter.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Rotten Horror Picture Show. We finished up Friday the 13th on Patreon, which the final episode should be out now. And this year, I assume this is in 2022. When this
will be 2022.
Amanda and I will be doing Stephen King adaptations, one a month. Book ended by It Part 2 and the 1990 Tim Curry version of It, and then a bunch of other ones in between. And Badass, there should be a new episode of Badass out by this point, I think. But that's kind of a bridge between, we're kind of in a bridge period between the original series and Batman Beyond. So it's going to be a couple before we start Batman Beyond. And
sure.
If you want to copy my book, Bloody Hell, which is out, my graphic novel, I think the best bet is either to order it from your comic store or go directly to the publisher, which is A Wave Blue World. They got a website. You can order it from there. It's been backed up or sold out or something on Amazon. So it's easier to go to the source.
Straight to the source.
And thank you to everyone who supported that when I did the Kickstarter. It was a long haul, but the book's finally out, and I think it looks great. So hope you guys enjoy it.
There it is. Yeah, I have mine. There it is. This is the right way up, right? There we go. Look at that. There it is. I can color correct with this one, actually. You know, I do. I haven't talked to you about this really. I find the colors interesting in this, in a good way. I haven't really thought about it, but it's like waves of color, which I find interesting. Like the color sort of, it's not like you have a whole mess of different colors on the same panel or anything. It's like the green turns into orange over the course of a couple pages, and then it turns into something else. And I think it came out interesting. I would love to see a colorist's, how that works. Is that all computer at this point for this thing?
Yeah. Unless you're hand painting stuff, which is not what most people do. It's all digital now.
How do you do gradients with that system? I guess I would have to look at like a YouTube tutorial. But how do you shade effectively in a computer program like that? I guess.
Yeah,
I have a hard time.
It. It's just. You can do it. It's just it depends what program you're using. Photoshop, or if you're coloring comics, it's going to be Photoshop or maybe something else. I know some people are using like Procreate or Clip Studio or stuff like that to do that stuff now. But I mean, the people who do it for a living are very good at it.
Yeah,
so
good
they know all the tricks and stuff.
I struggle with making like a single gradient in Photoshop, so I can't imagine having to do it on like a complicated image and be like, this is good for me. That's it. Yeah. You guys can get the book. It's out. And that's it. I guess we're done. I'll put a link. There's been links on the past couple of videos, and this one will probably have the same thing. 2 more episodes of Enterprise, and then the finale, and then we're done with Star Trek Enterprise. Hope everyone's having a good 2022 so far. We'll be back. See ya.